The Supreme Court agreeing to hear a case on transgender athletes and decide whether states can ban biological males from joining female sports teams. One of those cases is in West Virginia, where biological male Becky Pepper Jackson is fighting to participate in girls' track and field. Here to discuss is the governor of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey. So, Governor, tell me why it's so important for the Supreme Court to be taking up this case and exactly what the states are arguing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a very important case, and it's been lingering for a number of years. Back in 2021, West Virginia passed a common sense law to ensure that men were not playing sports with women. And there was no discrimination, but this law was passed. And there was a lot of concern about the basic unfairness of men playing sports with women. And after this law passed, there was a lawsuit. In fact, there was a biological male who wanted to participate within sports. And unfortunately, as this process has gone on, that individual has ended up displacing significant amounts of women in women's sports. And you see this starting to happen in different parts of the country. But here in West Virginia, we had a very clear, common sense law which ensured that men would play sports with men, women would play sports with women. There could be other opportunities as well for different classes. But we were very concerned about the fairness. We're concerned about the displacement. We're very happy that the Supreme Court is going to hear this case.
Well, West Virginia is not the only state that's been concerned about this. More than half of the states, 28 of them in the country, have bans on boys playing in girls' sports and vice versa. So does that add to your argument when it comes to the case that you're trying to make in front of the Supreme Court?
Well, we think it does. And we think that the case law precedent that's starting to build up really will be a big plus because we think there are arguments just that were made recently that can be applied here to show that it's very reasonable for a legislature to make a decision on the determination of sex. That's what happened in this case, that there was a determination that sex at birth, that people would be segregated based upon that. That's very, very significant, very reasonable. So what the court needs to do is to analyze what the standards are going to be to determine that and find that it's not violative of the Equal Protection Clause and Title IX. We think that there are a lot of states across the country that want the same sort of clarity. That's why we're very happy that this case is going up to the Supreme Court. It's long overdue, and I want to commend all the people in West Virginia and across the country that have been working on this case to make sure we can get a good decision about this West Virginia law.
Do you have any expectations about how the Supreme Court will rule? I know that we saw the Education Department this week getting some concessions from the University of Pennsylvania based on the upholding of Title IX. Do you have any ideas or predictions about how the Supreme Court may listen to these arguments and what kind of decisions they may make based on the case you're making?
Sure. Well, I think that you never can predict exactly what the U.S. Supreme Court will do, and you have to go in very prepared. But we think that the development of the case law starts to lead you in this direction, that it's very reasonable for state legislatures to define the differences with men and women based upon biological sex. And so I think that that's a very compelling argument. The other point that I would make is that this is a case that had a very exhaustive district court record where the district court judge originally slapped an injunction on the law, but after thousands and thousands of pages of evidence was provided, ultimately turned around and sided with us. And that's why we're very hopeful that as this ultimately went before the Supreme Court, people would see the evidence and they would side in our direction. So I can't ever predict what the total will be, but I am very optimistic that we're correct on the law.
Well, there's a lot of legal precedent pointing to biological men not being in women's sports. And I think a lot of Americans across the country who want fairness restored and the law upheld will be watching these arguments very closely. Governor Patrick Morrisey.
This is a basic case of common sense, and I'm very hopeful it's going to get resolved the right way.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Governor. Great to see you. Happy Independence Day.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.